Before sunrise on a November morning, 80 Amish men, women, and children are already moving. 21 hogs, 2 days, 4,500 pounds of meat. And to understand how they do it, you have to start 6 months earlier in May when a 50-pound piglet arrived and began eating everything the farm could not use. The November decision. The Amish do not butcher in November because their ancestors butchered in November. They butcher in November because November solves three problems at the same time, and solving three problems with one decision is how Amish farming works. The first problem is the hog itself. By late autumn, a pig started in spring has been fattening through the entire growing season. 6 months of kitchen scraps, garden surplus, and cornfield gleanings have taken it from 50 pounds to somewhere between 250 and 280. It is as heavy as it will get before winter feed costs begin to erode the return. The second problem is labor. November is the lowest pressure month in the Amish farming calendar. The harvest is finished. The fields are resting. The community has time. The third problem is temperature. Processing 280 pounds of meat takes multiple days. Cold outdoor air, not freezing, but cold, keeps the carcass from spoiling while the work proceeds at the pace that 80 people working together can maintain. The timing did not come from tradition. It came from paying attention to when all three conditions aligned and repeating that decision every year until it became tradition. Raising the hog. A pig arrived on the Amish farm in May weighing 50 pounds. For the next 6 months, it ate what the farm produced in excess and could not use for anything else. Kitchen scraps from a household of 10 or 12, surplus vegetables from a garden that produces more than the family can eat or preserve, extra milk from the dairy cow when production exceeds the household's needs, orchard windfalls, apples, pears, whatever falls before it can be picked that would otherwise rot on the ground. Cornfield gleanings after the harvest, where the pig moves through the stalks taking what the plow left behind. A healthy hog converts 2 to 6 pounds of feed into 1 pound of body weight. More importantly, the feed it is converting on an Amish homestead costs almost nothing because it is the waste stream of a farm that produces food for people first and feeds the animals what remains. By the time November arrives, the pig that cost the family a small purchase price in May has grown to slaughter weight almost entirely on material the farm would otherwise have composted or discarded. That is the economic logic of the Amish pig before a single pound of pork is produced. Before dawn, the day before the community butchering begins, the men and older boys are already working. The hogs are dressed, the first stage of the process that prepares the carcass for the cutting and processing that the full community will complete over the following 2 days. Bologna is mixed and loaded into the smoker the evening before, so it is ready to come out the following morning when the 80 people begin arriving. Tables are carried in from trucks and buggies and set up in the woodworking shop or barn that has been designated as the butchering space for the year. Whichever building in the community has enough square footage to accommodate the grinders, the stuffers, the tables, the totes, and the 8 dozen people who will be working at once. Spice and seasoning mixes are laid out in separate containers, different blends for breakfast sausage, kielbasa, bologna, and hot dogs, each measured in advance, so the mixing proceeds without confusion when the bowls begin arriving from the grinder lines faster than any one person can manage alone. Every tote is marked with the name of the family it belongs to. Every bowl is marked. Every package will be marked. In a community processing 21 hogs for 20-some families simultaneously, the marking system is not optional. It is the entire logistics operation. The Carcass. When the full community arrives and the work begins in earnest, the carcasses are divided into their major sections in a specific order that reflects the different timelines of what each part becomes. The prime cuts come first: the hams, the tenderloins, the bacon slabs, the pork loins, the ribs. These are the cuts that will go immediately to the freezer or directly into brine curing, and they need to be separated before the temperature of the workspace rises enough to affect the meat. An experienced man with a meat saw works down the carcass, methodically, pork chops cut from the loin, ribs separated from the belly, Hams freed from the hindquarters and the whole muscle cuts that will be sliced after curing. As each cut comes off the carcass, it is passed to the next set of hands at the next station. Nothing waits. The fat is set aside in one container. The organs, liver, heart, tongue, brains are separated and assigned to the people responsible for preparing them. What remains of the carcass after the prime cuts and the fat and the organs are removed goes into the totes designated for the grinder. On a day processing 21 hogs, the carcass work runs continuously from early morning until the last animal is broken down in the afternoon. The grinder lines. While the carcass stations are still running, the grinder lines have already been operating for hours. Ground meat moves from the grinders into large totes at a pace that keeps multiple stations working simultaneously. The grinders cannot outrun the mixers, and the mixers cannot outrun the stuffers, so the entire line runs at the speed of its slowest station, and everyone in that chain adjusts their pace to keep the flow even. The women who run the mixing station season the ground pork by hand, measuring salt, pepper, sage, and the specific spice blend for each variety into the tote and working it through the meat with both hands until the distribution is even throughout. A batch mixed unevenly produces sausage that tastes different from one link to the next, and at the scale of 21 hogs, an inconsistent batch is hundreds of pounds of product that does not meet the standard the community expects. Once the sausage is seasoned and mixed, it moves to the stuffer's large home-fabricated machines operated by 2 or 3 people that press the meat continuously into casings, which are twisted into links by the person at the end of the line at a rhythm that, on the best days, makes the entire operation look almost mechanical, despite the fact that every part of it is being done by hand. The outdoor kettle. Outside the main building, a large cast iron kettle sits over an open fire managed by the men assigned to that station. The pig fat that was cut into 1-inch cubes during carcass processing renders slowly in the kettle. The heat separates the clean white lard from the tissue, and the lard is ladled off as it rises to the surface. When the rendering is complete, the solid material remaining in the kettle is pressed to extract the remaining fat, and what is left, the cracklings, is distributed to the children working the outdoor stations, who eat them warm beside the fire. The cracklings are the first food produced by butchering day. The lard that was rendered goes into containers that will supply the household's cooking, baking, and cast iron seasoning for the following year. When the kettle is emptied of fat, it is cleaned and refilled with water and the trimmed bones from the carcass work. The bones boil until the remaining meat falls free of them. School-aged children are called to a table beside the kettle where they work in groups, picking the bones clean with their hands and depositing the small pieces of pork into a bowl that will become the base of the scrapple. This is one of the traditional jobs assigned to children on butchering day, not because the work is simple, but because it is the kind of slow, attentive labor that children do well when they understand what it produces. The smoker. The bologna and kielbasa that were stuffed and loaded into the smoker the previous evening come out the following morning carrying the color and flavor that only hardwood smoke produces over a long, slow exposure. They come out hot and need to be cooled quickly. If the internal temperature does not drop fast enough, the casings continue to cook from the outside in, and the texture of the meat changes in ways that cannot be reversed. Cooling is managed by the people assigned to that station, who move the smoked links rapidly to a cooled surface and then, once the temperature has dropped to the point where handling is safe, pass them to the vacuum sealing station. The people working the sealing station place each link into a bag, seal it under vacuum using a machine that removes the air before closing the bag, and mark it with the owner's name and the cut before it goes into the tote designated for that family. When the smoker is emptied, it is reloaded with the next batch. The smoker runs continuously for both days of butchering, and the men managing it do not leave their station for long. Smoke management, the temperature, the wood, the duration, determines the quality of every smoked product that goes home with every family. It is not a task that tolerates inattention. Scrapple. After the prime cuts are frozen or curing, after the sausage is stuffed and smoked and sealed, after the lard is rendered and the organs are processed, What remains is boiled down the broth from the bones that the children picked clean, combined with the small pieces of pork they separated from those bones, plus the meat scraps and trimmings that accumulated throughout the day at every cutting station and were set aside specifically for this purpose. Into this broth goes cornmeal, salt, black pepper, and sage. The mixture is stirred continuously over heat until it thickens to a consistency that will hold its shape when poured into a loaf pan and left to cool. From 2 hogs, a single Amish butchering day produces 17 gallons of pawn hoss scrapple in Pennsylvania Dutch. A word that in the German settler tradition it came from meant simply the dish made from what is left. The recipe arrived in Pennsylvania with German immigrants in the 17th century and has not changed in the 300 years since because there is nothing in it to change. Boiled pork broth, cornmeal, seasoning, thyme. The loaves cool overnight in a cold room. The following morning they are sliced thick, laid in a cast iron pan in rendered lard, and fried until the outside is crisp and the inside is still soft. Served with eggs and bacon, it is the breakfast that Butchering Day makes possible for months after Butchering Day is finished. Preservation. The meat that leaves the farm on the second evening of butchering does not all go to the same place in the household. Each cut has a preservation method matched to how it will be used and how long it needs to last. Frozen cuts, pork chops, ribs, tenderloins, bulk sausage go directly into the freezer and remain there until they are needed through winter and into spring. Hams do not go to the freezer immediately. They are submerged in a brine solution that the family prepares in advance. Salt, water, and sometimes sugar or herbs depending on the household tradition, and left to soak for approximately 1 week before being removed, dried, and sliced with a meat saw into the thick steaks that will be eaten through the months ahead. The bacon slab receives a similar treatment. Canned pork is handled differently from everything else. Raw meat is packed into clean glass jars, sealed with lids, and processed in a pressure canner at the temperature required to kill bacterial contamination and create the vacuum seal that allows the jar to store at room temperature without refrigeration for an extended period. A family whose freezer fails in January does not lose their canned pork. A family that runs out of frozen cuts in February still has canned product on the shelf. Scrapple keeps for weeks in a cool cellar without any additional processing. Together, the 4 preservation methods guarantee that one November butchering supplies the household until the following spring when the new pig is already gaining weight on the next season's kitchen scraps. At the end of the second day, the grinders are disassembled and scrubbed. The kettles are emptied and cleaned. The tables are folded and loaded back into the trucks and buggies that brought them. Each family collects their marked totes from the stacks along the wall and carries them home their share of 4,500 pounds of meat produced over 2 days by 80 people working together in a woodworking shop that was cleared for the occasion. The pig that started the year at 50 pounds on kitchen scraps and cornfield gleanings has become bacon and ham and sausage and kielbasa and scrapple and lard and canned pork, and none of it required a grocery store, a processing plant, a refrigerated supply chain, or a single dollar spent on anything that the farm did not already produce. The Amish raise pigs for the same reason they have raised pigs for 300 years. Not because tradition demands it, because the pig is the most efficient converter of farm waste into human food that agriculture has ever produced. And because 80 people working 2 days together can do what no single family working alone ever could, the community and the pig solve the same problem. Neither of them does it by accident.